Right, guys, I think we'll kick off. So thank you all so much for coming to our Power BI meetup. Now, I understand there will be some new faces here. So just to give you a bit of an intro, so about Power BI Brum. So it's a user group that we started back in February. It was based off the back of the success in Manchester and Leeds. It's an opportunity for people to come together, network, grow your skills, and obviously have a bit of fun as well. So in terms of kind of one of the goals here, so if you do need any advice in terms of your career, next steps, so if you're looking for a new job or if you're looking to bring someone into your team, if you just find myself or if you find Liam at the back over there, it's myself and him who are part of the BI and data team here at Robert Walters. So we're getting a quick intro done in now, and then I'm going to hand over to Mathias, who's going to be covering Power BI developer mode and reports. We'll have a short break just to have a bit of pizza, a couple of drinks, and then we'll hand over to Jay, who'll be dialing in to cover Power BI consulting, design and discovery. So upcoming meetings. So September, Thursday the 21st, 4 weeks today, we're going to be at KPMG again. So we're going to have a duo from KPMG, and we are just confirming the other speaker, which we should be able to get updated by next week. And then October, we do actually have Thomas Martins and Laura Graham Brown confirmed, and venue TBC on that. As ever, if anyone knows of anyone who would have a venue that would be able to host one of the events, please do come and find myself or Liam. And if anyone does interested in speaking on one of them, if anyone has a topic, or if anyone knows anyone that would be interested in speaking, please do come and find us. So yeah, once again, thank you all so much for coming, and I'll hand you over to Mathias.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to switch the presentation and then get started. There we go. All right. Perfect. Hello, and thanks for coming. Thanks for the invitation as well. This is my first ever trip to Birmingham, I have to admit. So a pretty big deal. So far, very enjoyable. And want to talk about Power BI developer mode and specifically how it relates to reports. Who knows about Power BI developer mode and what that is? Just so I can sort of gauge the audience a little bit. Okay, it's a fairly new thing. It's in public preview right now, so absolutely no big deal if you haven't heard about it. But before we get there, just a quick intro. The name's Mathias Thierbach. I'm now self-employed as of a month ago. Data platform MVP, and I'm also a Power BI contributor. In fact, I contributed TMDL. Who's heard of TMDL? Yeah. Okay. So that's not something we're covering today because that's relating to models and data sets. I'm talking about reports. But yeah, this is another passion topic of mine. LinkedIn. I'm still calling it Twitter. I'm old-fashioned. GitHub, and then the link at the bottom. That's where I'm collecting publicly available recordings, like the one we're producing right now, of presentations and streams and whatnot. So I think there are like 45 or so at the moment. Okay, so I want to cover 4 main topics. First of all, a very brief intro to dev mode or developer mode. Then we're going to look at what developer mode means with respect to reports. We're going to see that that's very limited, which is how I'm then going to move over to pbi-tools, which is which is my own open source tool, and then we're going to look at specifically how to track changes, and we'll see what the future holds for developer mode. All right, so developer mode was introduced in public preview, I think in June, maybe May, so just a few months ago, it feature, well, first of all, you have to enable it. It's a preview feature that you have to enable in Power BI desktop options, otherwise you're not going to get it. And the way you access it is basically using the save as dialog by changing the output type to pbi-p. as opposed to pbi-x. pbi-p is the Power BI project format. What you're going to get, I'm going to do a demo shortly, is rather than one single black box pbi-x file, you're going to get a folder structure with stuff that is actually much more accessible. And that's the whole point. It's called developer mode because developers like to look at code. So developer mode gives us more files that are readable. Most of them, almost exclusively, they're actually JSON files, I think. That means you can look at them in a text editor, and ultimately you can make changes to them. And Power BI Desktop can save into pbi-p, but obviously can read from pbi-p as well. So particularly with it reading from pbi-p and sort of people getting more familiar with what kind of changes they can make, some very interesting scenarios going to be possible. That's roughly what it looks like. So if you have a so-called thick report, one that has a data model as well as a report, by convention, you're going to get those two subfolders, which is basically your project name and then .dataset, .report. I think that may some of the names may actually change. Microsoft loves renaming stuff, and I heard whispers that some of that may be renamed before GA, but there we go. That's what we have for now. And this one is a pbi-p file, which is effectively just a shortcut. The only reason why it's there is so that you can go into Explorer and double click on it to actually get desktop open up everything else. It doesn't, which is why you can see there's basically nothing in it. It really just points to here. And then the report actually points to the data set. It's a lot of indirection. This is for reference. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. In fact, why don't we actually look at this? Why don't we actually look at this? Where am I? Thought I had, here we go. And how do I get this? Right. Okay. Right. So let me. So I've got a pbi-x file here. Let me open that in Power BI Desktop. So this is the old world, right? This is pbi-x file, everything in one file. You have no idea what's in there. And I converted to dev mode. Ah, very good. Let's do it that way around. I did test that earlier. Sometimes that's a bit funny. Here we go. Cool. So let me open it from here. Is that the one? Come on. Here we go. Right. So that's a thin report connected to a remote data set. And we're going to have a play with that a little bit throughout the evening. But in order to convert it to dev mode, I go to Save As. And then I'm going to create a new subfolder here. If that helps. And down here, I'm going to change it. And now I've got control so that pbi-p. There we go. All right. If I now go in here, I can see I've got the subfolder. And so let's open this up in VS Code. Here we go. Is that big enough? Okay, so here we go. So this is what's just been created. And we can see that we've got a whole bunch of files in here. As I said initially, right, the the actual PBIP file is really just a pointer, right? This is the relevant item in there, which is basically passed to the report. If we then go to the report, we've got the definition.pbir file. R is for report, PBI report. And again, that one also is just a pointer. It basically tells us, in fact, this isn't even a thin report, it's a thick one, as you can see. So this one has a dataset reference, which can be by path, which means it's a local dataset, you know, where the definition and the data sits, or it can be by connection, in which case I'm pointing to a Power BI workspace. And then if I go to my dataset, the same applies. I've got definition. They called it PBI dataset as opposed to PBID or something like that, but there isn't really much in here, right? There's a lot of, we've got lots of metadata files here, like this one, item.config. That one is relevant if you use Trident Git integration. But ultimately, the gist of what's actually in my project sits in just 2 files, and that's the point I wanted to get across. We're only looking at the data set once, and then we're going to forget about it because that's not what the talk is about. So we've got the model.bim file. Ultimately, this is going to be TMDL. The team is working very hard on getting there, but for the time being, it's just model.bim. And this is where everything about my report is defined. One single file, and it is one step forward, one step backwards, if you will, right? So it's a step forward in the sense that I can actually see JSON, right? I can look at that and maybe I can even make sense of it. So for instance, if I know that a section is actually a page, and if I know that the first page in my report is called sales by month, I've got ordinal 3 here, so it's not an order. Ordinal 4. So here we go. This one, that's the first one, right? I've got sales by month here. And if I then know that the visual containers are basically all the various visuals on that page, so let's do a count. This one has 2 slices, 1 matrix, and a text box, so 4, right? So I should get to 1, 2, 3, 4. Very good. We've got that, and we can also see this one may look familiar for some of you. If you ever looked into Power BI Workspace in the service and look at the URL when navigating to a particular page, that's precisely what comes through, right? Also very interesting because now that you've got access to the source code, you can give this a meaningful name rather than this auto-generated stuff, right? So that's what we have right now. But and that's step forward, right? Step backwards is, first of all, everything sits in one file, which is basically the equivalent of having a single BIM file for our model, which is precisely what TMDL was meant or was designed to overcome. And secondly, this stuff actually contains the real interesting information here, right? And if anyone who knows JSON knows that that isn't native proper JSON, right? Anyone who knows JSON knows that this is actually a stringified JSON object that's embedded into a JSON property, which means you can't do very much with that with respect to tooling, right? This is weird stuff munched together. Not readable. I mean, this thing, right? We only see sort of the first 70 characters here. This is, look, this is long. no one can read this, right? So what you'd have to do is to sort of extract it and then unstringify it and look at it as a separate JSON object. So this is where we currently still have limitations. And the team is, the Power BI team is very committed to overcoming those, but things usually take a long time in Redmond. So let me show you what we can see today with respect to just what we're getting out of the box with pbi-p. So for that purpose, I'm gonna actually git enable this entire folder, so that way we can basically sort of create a snapshot of it, and if I then make subsequent changes, we can see only what's changed, right? So I'm just gonna say just gonna commit everything we have in that folder. There we go. Right. So if I now go back into my report, and if I change, in fact, I don't right. Let me just navigate to the second page, because what page shows up as my initial page is actually one of the properties that's saved in my report definition. So just by switching that, and that's probably something you know, right? Even in PBX times, accidentally closing and saving a report on the wrong tab then means that all your users are going to be presented with that as a new landing page. Very frequent problem. So there used to be a bug here when in fact, I'm just gonna be very safe. So here we go. All right, cool. Right. So I've now saved back into the same folder. If I now go, there we go. Right. So that's what I was expecting. Because this is Git enabled, I now get to see a very nice diff. But also the problem I explained earlier is directly with us, because here we go. I sort of have to dig into the details, right? And I need to know that I'm actually looking for a change here, right? So I can see that 0 shows up as red, so that 0 is no longer there. And I've got something in green on the right-hand side. So that 0 was replaced with a 1, right? So the active page is no longer index 0, but is index 1 now. Yeah, so pretty much that's how far things go today. I'm not even gonna, well, let's do one very simple thing. If I just insert a really simple, let's do a card. Here we go. Let's put sales amount in here. Here we go. So I'm adding, right, so we saw 4 visuals before. I'm adding a 5th one. If I go back and save, I should expect there we go, right? So remember when I basically showed we've got one snippet representing each visual, there's one additional one inserted now. So again, that's as far as things go with pbi-p. But until the Power BI team actually ship a new format for those reports, you're going to be very limited in terms of visibility and being able to reason about that. So switching to the next stage of the agenda, this is where pbi-tools comes in. And I'm showing that not because it's anything new. In fact, that's been around for a long time. In fact, in a way, it's actually provided a lot of sort of inputs to the Power BI team with respect to dev mode. But I'm showing it because even though we have dev mode now, it's still the only way to actually be sort of get sort of a developer-focused view of reports until, again, some point in the future when dev mode is more feature-rich. So pbi-tools is a open source tool which I've been working on for many years. Made it open source about 2 years ago, and it's back in the days it was the only way for you to be able to sort of drill into a pbi-tools file, sort of extract all the contents as readable and files that work well with source control, and be able to actually set up some CI/CD pipelines on top of it. Back in the day, I sort of had to, well, invent a folder structure that was suitable for that purpose. So that's what it looks like. It has a model subfolder. It has a report subfolder. Not too dissimilar from what the dev mode does, right? And then if you look on over here, you can see that for the report in particular, we're still using the term section because that's actually the internal term, but we actually have a nested folder structure, which means the internal structure of my report is represented in subfolders and files, and I can navigate through them. And if I make a change in one visual, then only one file changes, and I can actually see precisely what's going on in there. So let me show you what that looks like with that exact same report. So first of all, here we go. If I, yes. So first of all, pbi-tools is a command line tool. So it is extremely powerful, but it has a steep learning curve, and it doesn't have a nice UI or anything like that. I'm sorry, but it was good enough for what I needed, and creating UIs is very expensive. So if you wanna see everything in the pbi-tools way, all you do is pbi-tools extract, and then you provide the file name to your pbi-x file. So in this case, contoso.pbi-x, and by convention, it will create a subfolder named the same as your file, just without the extension. And it will extract everything into that folder. So if I open this one up in VS Code, we can see, there we go. So that's new, right? This is what was just created. And we can see that as far as our report is concerned, look at this. This is actually precisely what we see in desktop, right? We've got 5 pages, 6 pages, and the folder, the subfolders actually contain the display name. So you sort of navigate through your source code in the same way as you navigate through the UI, right? And in here, so this is the original pbi-x, right, where I haven't made any modifications yet. So just by sort of clicking my way through this folder structure, I can see my first page, sales by month, happens to have 4 visuals. And in fact, it also shows me what type they are, right? Remember, we had 2 slices, 1 text box, 1 pivot table. There we go. It's all here. And so pbi-tools hasn't invented a new format. It hasn't invented sort of new information that wouldn't be available. This is just sort of representing the exact same payload that we've seen in dev mode, but in a much more accessible way, right? Pretty much whenever we have a stringified JSON object that's in dev mode, here it actually shows up as a separate file with a proper JSON format, right? And ultimately, the hope is that the Power BI team will ship something quite similar as Dev Mode GA. That will require some patience. If you want to get all the benefits today, pbi-tools is your friend. I'm not saying that because I want to promote my tool. I'm saying that because ultimately this stuff will come from the product team. You can get a head start, right? If you want to get visibility into your reports, and if you want to begin to understand sort of what do the code artifacts look like, and how are the various visual changes I'm making actually represented in the underlying JSON, because that JSON payload is not likely to change significantly anytime soon. So I'm just gonna run you through. So first of all, we have basically 3 levels, right? We've got the report, we've got pages, we've got visuals. Pretty simple hierarchy. And each of those level, we basically have 3 files that make up that particular item. And they all happen to have the exact same format. So we've got a config file, we've got filters, and then we've got a main root file that pretty much contains information about that particular object, right? So in this case, it's a visual container. If I go to the page level, I've got config, I've got filters, and I've got a section file. If I go to the report, I've got config and I've got a report. If I had report level filters defined, they would actually show up. So it's always those 3 files. And they're all well structured JSON. There's a lot of stuff in here, at least with having separate files here, you get all the benefits if you use source control. So why don't we have a look at that? In fact, remember I made one change here, right? I added one visual, right? So if I save this one back to the original pbi-tools location, I really hate this dialogue. I never know what I'm doing here. Sorry, that's feedback for the product team. All right, so I've now overwritten my pbi-tools file, right? And if I go back to my command line and run the exact same command again, pbi-tools is designed to sort of replace the previous version and just override it with whatever has changed. And the one thing I didn't do, I should have Git enabled that, right? Because now we're not actually going to see. Sorry. So let me just do that once more. In fact, let me put this into let me do a new subfolder here, just so I don't have nested Git repos. Let's call this pbi-tools. Okay. Okay. So let's do it once more. Okay. Cool. So this one is in here. Okay. So let's extract this with my latest changes, and then I can commit it. There we go. I'm also going to put a git ignore file here because that's good practice. And I'm going to say, do not keep pbi-tools files under source control for me. Okay, there we go. Init, right. So this is everything in Git, and now I can start making changes. So let's do the same change I did earlier. Very simple, just changing the landing page. Super simple. I hope. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that one does it. Just extracting it again, and go, and there we go. I've got two changes. One of them is so that file pbi-x proj, that's a pbi-tool specific file, but it just keeps a timestamp of whenever I last made some changes. So we can ignore that. The one change we really care about, look at this, right? So this is the exact equivalent of what we did before, but now it makes sense, right? Now I can see at the report level, my configuration changed, and what changed? The active section index, right? So this is where dev mode needs to get to at some point. So let's do something a bit more interesting. So first of all, so changed landing page. Here we go. If I now rather than adding a visual, if I just remove one, right? So this one here, which I added earlier, and then save and extract. Now we're going to see that, here we go, look at this. Now I've got 5 files which have been removed, right? They show up as deleted. So same thing, right? I've got very granular change tracking now, and what else has changed? Something else has changed here. Oh, of course, yeah, because I switched back to my sales by month page, right? So obviously my active section is now 0 rather than 1. So I've got 2 changes now, right? Basically the entire subfolder that represents that card visual is now gone, right? It actually cleans it up for you very nicely as well. So here we go. We can see there are only 4 subfolders now. It won't leave any stuff behind. So let's commit that one as well. But I'm excluding the pbi-x proj file because, as I said, it maintains a timestamp, so it would create lots of noise, which I don't care about. There we go. Now, obviously, what you just saw was quite involved, right? So I had to run back and forth, and I had to sort of use different tools and push save, and then run my command line. All of that. That can be quite annoying, and you may well forget some of these steps in between. So next level, pbi-tools can automate that for you as well. So that allows us to tell pbi-tools keep a watch on that particular file and automatically extract the latest changes from it every time you detect that it's been saved. And that means I can actually stay in desktop, I can make my changes, and just by pressing the save button, pbi-tools will kick off and do its stuff for me, right? So let me show you how you do that. So first of all, it's another version of the extract command, but with an additional argument. pbi-tools is self-documenting. As long as you know the command, which in this case is extract, you can just run pbi-tools command without nothing else, and it will actually tell you the documentation, right? So this is as far as I made it documentation-wise. But what we're looking for is basically this guy here. So if we specify -watch in connection with a port number, we put pbi-tools into watch mode, and so port number is also documented here, and that's probably something you sorry, I'm talking rubbish. We don't need the port number. We need the process ID. So this one here, PID. And so that basically tells pbi-tools which instance of desktop to watch. Now, you don't have to drill through Task Manager. What you can just do pbi-tools info, and it will tell you. Here we go. pbi-tools info gives you lots of diagnostic information about everything Power BI desktop related and your system, and specifically it tells you which Power BI desktop sessions are currently running, and particularly what is the process ID, right? In this case, 9588. So if I now say extract-PID 9588-watch, here we go, it will now enter watch mode, and it will just sit there and wait for me to press save. So I'm going to do split screen here so you can see the magic. Look at this. If I press save, it's just doing its thing, right? And so that allows us now to actually explore the changes with respect to how they are reflected in code very nicely, because I can make one change, press save, and then actually see how that comes through, right? And again, in the future, once dev mode is in GA and once changes at that source code level are fully supported by Microsoft, you can take full advantage of all the learnings you're making today in terms of knowing what code change does what in the UI. So let's do, I always do silly things like putting a color on stuff. Why do I have on object? Sorry, for some reason I've got on object formatting enabled here. I have absolutely no experience with that, and I didn't think I had it enabled. So I'm just going to be I'm going to be how do I do it?
It's on the right side.
Sorry?
On the right hand side.
Oh, here. Yeah, thank God. It's meant to be more intuitive, right? Oh, here we go. Right. So let's give it a blue with some transparent. Here we go. Right. So if I want to see, how does giving a 50% transparency blue background, what does that look like for a pivot table? Just save this guy. Has it done it already? Yes, I think it's done it already. So if I go here, that's it. Here we go. Right. So how do I know it's that? Well, first of all, the path actually tells me which visual I'm talking about, right? So this is the page, and this is the visual. So the pivot table on the sales by month page. If I collapse that, I can see that in the config file for that visual, for that pivot table, I have a new section added, which happens to be called background, with a property called color and another property called transparency, right? So whilst there's a lot of noise in here, I mean, intuitively you would think background, color, and then whatever number or so. Microsoft team likes it complicated. So whilst there's a lot of noise here, if you're actually tracking your changes in such a granular way, you get the gist of it very quickly, right? Basically, any visual object and visual property is always represented like that. There's an object name. The object happens to have properties. They're mentioned here as basically dictionary keys, and then the corresponding value shows up, and that always depends on what type of property it's, right? If it's a title, it's just text. If it's a color, it can be a theme color reference, or it can be a hex code, and so on and so forth, right? If it's a width, it's just a number. So that's the idea, really. Here is another example for a Boolean property, right? So row subtotals are enabled, right? So that's how it works. And if I now go in and say, pivot table background color, commit that, it means that next time I'm making changes, that one will be out of the way. Now, we've got some more things showing up here. So just wanted to talk about that as well. So outspace pane, which is a bit of a weird name, right? What is that? That is actually the filters pane. And the property is expanded. It was false, is now true, which obviously we can see, right? So if I collapse that and save, we would expect so fast, I can't even tell. There we go. Look at that, right? So it's now gone. So it's no longer a change, right? Because it's now gone back. So that's that. We always got to be careful if you want to track very specific changes that you don't accidentally do other things. And then this one, I think I've got that documented in the slides as well, which we'll see in a second. There are two visual level files called query.json and data transforms.json. Those are cache files. They are irrelevant. They just contain information that is also available elsewhere. And what I would recommend is to always git ignore them. So if you use pbi-tools with reports, that git ignore by convention should ignore your pbx file. It should also ignore query.json, and it should ignore data transforms.json. Why? Because there's actually no relevant information in there. This is just duplication of information that's already in my config file, and git ignoring it means we have even fewer changes to worry about. There we go. So don't want to overrun. Let me just go back to the slides, and then we can do a few questions as well. Right, so I talked about this. Right, so here I'm explaining for each sort of level in the hierarchy what type of files we can expect and what they're called. And pbi-tools extract we looked at. So there are basically two primary ways of calling pbi-tools extract, either with a file name, which is then a one-off operation, or with the process ID and -watch, in which case it will stay there until you explicitly end it with Control-C. That's a Windows OS convention. I'll put a few links here regarding dev mode and pbi-tools. And any questions? Yes.
Yeah, if you were to extract PBIX using pbi-tools and made a change in any of the JSON files, could you then recombine that back to a PBIX?
Yes. But that is not Microsoft supported, right? You're on your own. The product team is always extremely adamant that if you do that, you cannot call Microsoft support. Yes, that's what pbi-tools is designed for, right? So the chart I had here was basically shows the three sort of main use cases or stages at which pbi-tools comes in, right? So we're doing local development in desktop, and then we're using the extract command in order to get to a source control format, right? Which has the nice folder structure. And then if we then want to put a CI/CD pipeline on that for deployment, obviously we need to recompile it, right? And so this is actually where a compile command comes in, and that's precisely what pbi-tools does. There are some limitations. So for instance, you can only compile into a pbi-x file if it's a thin report. It will not work if there's an embedded model. And pbi-tools basically distinguishes between deploying thin reports and deploying data sets. And uses completely different ways of achieving that. Data sets are deployed using the XMLA endpoint. Thin reports are deployed using a Power BI REST API. So yes.
Yes, thank you. First of all, great t-shirts.
Well, so credits should go to Reed Havens. He made that.
Perfect. So you've done such a great job here with pbi-tools and TMDL that Microsoft is taking that and using it in Power BI. Will you continue to develop pbi-tools when that is GA, or what's the future?
Absolutely. I mean, pbi-tools primarily, from my point of view, is a DevOps and CI/CD tool, right? It only had to work on all the sort of extract and compile stuff because there was no other way of getting there, right? But moving forward, those two things are basically taken care of by dev mode and Microsoft finally, but this one isn't, right? And so this is where future investment is going to get into, right? Even what we've seen already in terms of Fabric Git integration, I mean, I'm being very frank here, right? For my sort of use cases, that's not good enough, right? There's no control, there's too much black box, you have no idea. You can't inject anything, right? So I won't use it, right? This is where I use pbi-tools.
Yeah, there's a people always hear that work with me, and we use pbi-tools every day. So I think
Oh,
we can
cool.
continue using it.
Yeah.
Even after Microsoft make a GA. So thanks a lot.
The only difference is in the future, and that's a big deal. I will no longer have to say pbi-tools does it, but it's not Microsoft supported, right? In the future, I can say it is Microsoft supported, right? And that's sort of what we're all waiting for with respect to dev mode actually going GA. Yep.
You didn't specify, but the dev mode feature and everything around that, that's not restricted to like premium workspaces. The reason why I ask is that I can see quite a lot of overlap between that and the kind of deployment pipelines existing in Power BI. Where do you think, because those two things seem to kind of completely divert. One is a UI managed tool that you pay a hell of a lot of money to be able to run, and the dev tool seems to be going completely opposite direction. What do you think they're thinking?
Well, I mean, let's be really clear, right? So dev mode is the ability to see the internal sources within a pbi-x file and use source control and change track, right? Per se, that's got nothing to do with deployment, right?
Yeah.
Deployment pipeline is a Power BI service feature that allows you to basically define different environments and then push things across, right? So, I mean, at first sight, those are two different concerns, right? Obviously, ultimately, they should and have to work together, right? In the sense that once you're here, once you use source control and you use Git and CI servers, you then want to use those capabilities in terms of running automated pipelines based on merge requests, based on something being pushed to a particular branch or so, right? But those are advanced scenarios as far as Microsoft's concerned, right? And with deployment pipelines, they don't cover that kind of user, right? And even with Fabric integration, I would argue that you can't implement an advanced scenario.
Scale of change in that workspace well in terms of changes. When I think of the developers in my team, I think to myself, are they going to have a better user experience by making the changes in the desktop versus using this environment? So where do you think from between, say, adding measures DAX versus
yes, no, thank you. Yes, no, thank you for that question, because it's an important one, and I did not mean to propose that you would make changes to a report in code instead of desktop. Not at all. I mean, that would be crazy in a way, right? Because clearly, I mean, even though desktop doesn't make stuff always very easy, I would still prefer to change my color in there rather than sort of finding. I think the idea of the source control comes from somewhere else. It comes from, first of all, it comes from a quality assurance background, right? If you are in an enterprise context and you've got large teams and you delegate certain tasks, how do you actually review and sign off the changes before they go into production, right? If I'm in charge, and I used to be, right, I used to be in that position for many years, I'm not going to take someone's PBX file and open it up in desktop and then sort of try to look whether it seems right. But I can look at diff changes, at diffs and changes to see whether you know, that particular task someone someone claims they've done, whether that corresponds to the changes I can see, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, once we have the report sources split out into more than one file, we can actually collaborate, right? One developer can work on one set of pages, another one can work on another set of pages, and we can merge them together without actually getting any problems, right? With a single file, we can't do that, right? And then the third thing is, this is where things get really interesting, and this is what dev mode is going to enable down the line. We can think about scripting, right? Because at the end of the day, this is all JSON, right? And that's a format that's well understood. So we can think about actually generating that kind of stuff, right? For instance, you could think about generating like an entire report template when you start a new project, and then you go in and do the fine tuning in desktop rather than having to do everything from scratch, right? And that's what you get, right? It's not meant to be no longer use desktop. It's adding a lot of new capabilities.
I guess we're gonna have to leave it there. We have Peter, do we? Yeah, we have Peter on the door to the right. Mathias, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.